Alright, hey guys. So I promised I'd do a quick deck profile, just like on the deck that I played this past weekend at the box tournament. I've never actually done a deck profile, so this would be the first time I do one. But basically, my matchups were Kashtira, Labyrinth, Kashtira, Kashtira. I went undefeated. My round one opponent, I lost the die roll. He goes first. He ends up making like the Macrocosmos board, blocking two of my zones. And then on my turn, I kind of just try to play. Obviously, we can't really play into that board. I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle from the start. He blocks two more of my zones after using his effects. And I kind of just say, like, scoop it up. Like, there's no reason to waste more time in this game, so we just go next. Game two, I end up going first. I end up using a bunch of cards and then just setting up, like, Rafflesia, Sarah, Pingu, and then setting three. I think it's like two whole cards and a judgment. He summons Unicorn. I don't respond to his Unicorn. He goes Planet, he goes Birth. He normal summons Denko. So I judgment the Denko summon, and then I use my traps to respond to his other cards. And then I trigger Xera, I trigger Holotea to summon the Sarah, or summon off to trigger the Sarah. And then I use a couple of other cards to get rid of his planet and his back row on my turn, and then he kind of just scoops it up, knowing that he's about to get OTK'd, so he just goes ahead and goes next. Game three, he sets up the Macrocosmos, a Rice Heart, with a couple of materials on it, and then it goes into like a grind with me and him. Like I'm summoning cards, setting cards, like just protecting myself. He's banishing a card here and there with a Rice Heart. It ends up coming down to him normal summoning a Unicorn while having a Rice Heart. I floodgate the Unicorn, so it goes in defense mode. I have the field spell up, so he ends up just passing because he doesn't want to put his Rise Heart in attack mode because he's afraid of Lightning Storm. I'm assuming since it's game three. I draw into a line to make Pingu, and I have the field spell up, and I have like two traps in hand. So I search with Pingu, swing into his Rise Heart. I take some damage. I think it's like 600 or 700 at that time. I end up making Zeus on the Pingu because it wasn't destroyed by battle. So, oh no, his dude wasn't attack mode then because I had to take the damage and it wasn't an attack. Like it wasn't gonna die. So the field spell protects me from destruction. And so I swing in. I think I'm like taking like 37 or something because of his attacker initially. And then I make Zeus, clear the board, set my two cards, pass. So I have the Pingu searched card, and then I have the two set and a Zeus. So then he sets one, I think. It ends up being like an imperm. I end phase. Oh no, I don't have cards engraved because he banished my materials off of the Rise Heart. So I draw. I normal Vermelio, make Sarah. He doesn't want to respond to that, I'm assuming, because he's just waiting to see what happens. And then I use the the one that specials from hand to trigger my Sarah, set Holotea, trigger Holotea, summon Vermelio from deck, pop the Imperm, so he just negates the effect with the Imperm, obviously, negating the column. And then I just go into the Link 3, and I end up just OTKing him, like, right after that. So I end up winning that 1-2-1. I go against Labyrinth, match 2. So against Labyrinth, I win the die roll, go first. I set up my traps in my field. He kind of just can't play into me, and he scoops it up. Game 2, he tries to set up his board. Like he sets like 5 and summons 1. I end up trying to play through his back row. I mean, I played through at least 4 of them, and I'm fine. But then on one of them, he summons this big, like 2900 attack monster, and it pops my field spell, so I don't get my additional normal. And then he clears my monster with Tori, like my normal monster, like the one that I normal summon. So I played through at least 4 of them, but then after that, I just can't play into Tori and just get blown out. So I end up just having Sarah, Holotea, and passing, and he kind of just clears both of my cards and just ends up killing me that turn. He does like 7,500 damage that turn I draw, and it's not enough, so I just scoop it up and we go game 3. I end up going first. I set all my cards, play into. I just go Sarah Rafflesia because I'm afraid of Nib since I saw him search Nib game 2 off of Pot of Prosperity. So I didn't want to play into nib and just get like beaten by him just nibbing me and me losing my entire field. So I just go Sarah Holotea set 3, or Sarah Rafflesia set 3 and pass. I didn't really want to overextend. He goes in like his plays. We grind for like I think 3 turns. I just keep like holding his big cards, like floodgating them, or just I bottomless one of them I think just to get rid of it completely. And so it goes into like a grind, but then I keep using Mermelio off of like my special summon. So like I Diana bring it back, I Sarah bring it out from deck. Like I've just spammed Mermelio enough to the point where I just pop all of his background. He has none left. And then I Gravedigger's Trap Hole his Lord of the Heavenly Prison twice in hand, so I just burn him for 4k for free, and then I just end up making a field to do enough damage to burn him where he stays at 700 life. And then I have a Judgment set, knowing his only play is to normal summon the Labyrinth card that searches a spell and trap. So I just Judgment the card. I end up at 2k life, he's at 700. He realizes time's about to be called. I know he only has Lord and one of the big Labyrinths in hand, because he summoned it off the trap. So I knew I had game there, just Judgmenting the card, keeping the 2k life lead. So I just said I might as well Judgment this and make sure he has no play. So from there he ends up just scooping it up and he knows the game's over. Match 3 I play against Kashira again. This time he wins the die roll, but he lets me go first, not knowing what I'm playing. So I end up making like the super huge like Rafflesia, Pingu, Sarah, set 4 pass. And then on his turn, obviously, I'm able to just set up a bunch of cards, and I kind of just end up taking that game 1 pretty swiftly. He has no real responses. Like he's trying to play it, but he just keeps losing his back row. On his activation of Birth, I kind of just Holotea back Mermelio from Grave, pop it, so he has no real way to like do anything. And the Mermelio trigger sets from Sarah. So I said Trap Hole Nightmare, or no, I set Gravedigger's Trap Hole, so that way in case he has Nib on my next turn, I can just burn him and keep my play going, and also trigger the Sarah. So yeah, he has no way to play through that one, so he just scoops it up. We go game 2. He makes me go first again. I end up having like a super bricked hand. I think I have like Mermelio, Pudica, and Holotea. So I had normal Pudica to try and get the field spell so I can play, and he Valors me. So I'm just like, well, that sucks. So I go Sarah and set Holotea and pass. He clears my Sarah with something. And he has like Fenrir, Unicorn, the Scareclaw Cashier, and Rise Heart. The issue is I don't read cards. So I end up summoning Holotea into Fenrir's attack instead of waiting for the Arise Heart attack because I wanted to block the bigger damage when I should have just let the Fenrir hit me, let the Unicorn hit me, and then block the Arise Heart and keep my Hole on board and then make Sarah on the next turn and then trigger the Holotea Engrave to trigger a monster. But instead, I mess up and I just summon the Holotea into Fenrir, not really thinking about like Fenrir's effect. So he summons, swings, banishes, and then ends up swinging again, swinging and swinging, and I just end up losing. So in hindsight, I could have just waited and summoned it on the Arise Heart attack and protected myself. I would have only taken like, because he swung over Sarah for 26, which was like 1800 damage. And then it was 24, 25, and 15. So I just wanted to make sure, I wanted to block one of the bigger ones, but I should have just waited and blocked the 15 and lived, even though I would have been at low life. He probably would have just made a Rise Heart pass. And I think I could have played through the Rise Heart if I just played that correctly. But then I thought about it in my head and I was like, damn, I misplayed, but it's okay. I can just make it up in the next game. So I just focused a bit in game 3. I went first, set up a board of like, I just did the Rafflesia Sarah set 3 pass because I didn't want to play into Nib. So he ends up doing his plays. He activates Prosperity and he searches Thrust. So I know he has Thrust in hand. So I know I have Rafflesia Sarah and I know I'm going to trigger one of them. So he summons a Unicorn. I Floodgate it. He goes Birth and Specials, thinking I'm going to chain to like his summons. So he knows I'm going to activate the card. So I go for Flasia, and I bottomless the Ogre summon. So that triggers my Sarah. Sarah triggers, I summon Morelio. I pop his planet, so his Unicorn doesn't have buff defense. And then he ends up Prosperitying into Thrust. So I know he has like the Thrust card, so he thrusts. He sets Duster. So he activates Duster, and I just Judgment the Duster. I go down to 4k life. He ends up passing after that. So I just go on my play, kill his Unicorn. He ends up having like 2 in hand. And then he just kind of just slowly tries to play, but I just Rafflesia, and I Floodgate Trap Hole the Unicorn on summon, so he ended up having to not be able to play again. And he kind of just has to pass, and then next turn I just OT game and kill him. I have like 8,600 damage on board or something. So I take game 3 there, and I go into the final round again against Kestira. I win the die roll, and I end up going first. I set up like Rafflesia, Pengu, and Sarah using Parallel Exceed underneath the Sarah to trigger or to make the Rafflesia to guarantee that my cards can't get nibbed, which is why I extended to Pengu and set like 3. He goes, he tries to make a line to make a Baron. He like unicorns, I floodgate, triggers all like my cards. He makes Baron, I torrential. He tries to negate, I bottomless, so he ends up getting his Baron banished, and then I trigger the Sarah on resolution and just go off from there, and he just scoops it up knowing he's lost that game. Game 2, my opponent goes first, and he sets 1 and passes. So in my head, I know he's bricked. Like he has to have drawn a super bad hand. So I end up like drawing my next card, and I drew Lightning Storm. So I just Lightning Storm the back row, and I go off and end up like doing 6,600 damage or something. He's at 1,400 life, and he just draws his next card. Looks at it like I also after I attacked, I kind of just made sure that I had only 2 XYZs and the field spell on board because I didn't want my back row to get hit by the evenly because I bounced one back with Mantis just to make sure that I kept all of my cards on like the next play so he doesn't evenly me there. So he ends up like looking at his cards. He just like drops his hand down and shows me that he's literally drawn like 3 hand traps, and he kind of just can't play. Like I think he's drawn like double droll, in Ash and stuff, but he couldn't really do anything in response to me because I had Rafflesia the whole time. I think he drew the Ash for turn actually, so he actually didn't even have Ash. I think it was just like a bunch of dead hand traps that he couldn't use against me. And then he also had the nib, but I had the Rafflesia on my fifth summon, so again he couldn't really respond to me, so he just accepted that he wasn't going to take the 2k burn from a Gravedigger trap wall, so he just lost. He bricked on his own hand and he couldn't play. So I won the final 2-0. So I'm just going to do a quick deck profile and kind of explain some of the card choices, why I've chosen the ratios I have, and like just explain how the deck kind of works and why it works. So you play Triple Mantis. Obviously, this card searches any of your Traptrix monsters from deck and adds it to hand. Also on field, you can bounce back any trap and then reset a different one from hand. This card is how you get around Dianea's effect, because Dianea sets one from grave, but it's banished during the end phase of the next turn. So you're able to basically get around that effect by just bouncing it back to hand and keeping the card and setting it. Next is Triple Myrmilio. This is probably your second best normal summon or best normal summon depending on the hand. So he's able to search you any trap hole card from deck, and you can basically use him to search Holotea, summon Sarah, set Holotea, activate Holotea, trigger your plays. So this being one of your best normal summons is also like a reason this deck is really good because it lets you get like a 1 card full board. The other best normal summon probably in my opinion is Pudika. A lot of people didn't understand what this card like when it came out why it was so good. Yes, it also searches the field spell and gives you the second normal summon, but that's not the only thing. This card on special summon also banishes one of their cards. So this is another interruption, which is why normally people play 2 of this, but I think 3 is probably the right ratio because you want to see this in hand. Because getting that second normal summon is actually how you can play through a lot of like the Kashira boards, because you need that second normal summon because they're usually going to be able to respond to one of your summons. So you want to be able to at least summon twice. Next we play triple of this card. This is the new one. This is the one that specials from hand as long as you control a Traptrix monster. It's a quick effect, and a lot of people don't realize this, but this card actually is your protection from like Lightning Storm and stuff, and Twin. Because as long as this card's on board, you're able to protect your back row once each, which means you're allowed to basically like set up your whole field, set 3, search this off Pingu and pass. On your next turn, you can activate this, summon it, trigger your Sarah to set another, and then this will protect your back row from like Lightning Storm. So the only card you really have to worry about in this deck is evenly matched. So I've decided to play 3 of it just for that reason. Then 2 Dianea. I don't think you need to play 3 of this card, but this card is really good. It's able to just search. It's able to basically trigger your Sarah, so it searches guaranteed, and it also sets you another one that you discard off Holotea. So on summon, it's special from grave, and on special, it's sets from grave. So it's pretty much it's a guaranteed card just like recursion in the long like grind game. So it's good to have one in hand, and usually you want the other one off of the first Sarah you summon, so you can go into like reset the card you set off the Holotea. That's it for the Traptrix monsters. So it's pretty much like a bunch of 3-0s and then a 2-0. And then triple Parallel Exceed. This card just lets you make Rafflesia as your 5th summon, and it makes you be more protected from card effects and stuff because you don't get blown out by Nib. This is your guaranteed way to not get blown out by Nib, because if you do it the normal way and try to play like normally without this card, as your 5th summon, you'll always summon off Sarah instead. And that means you're more susceptible to getting nibbed. So if this is the 5th summon, and then you have Holotea set, you can keep the Holotea set, make it Rafflesia first, then trigger the Holotea, search off the or special off the Sarah, and that's how you can make the Pingu play, like the playline. So this is just a guaranteed safer method instead of getting potentially nibbed on your 5th summon from Sarah. For hand traps, just triple Ash. I opted to just play this because it hits a lot more cards. Like in general, like obviously it's gonna trigger your opponent's Kesturias, but if you can stop like a planet or something, I stopped the terraforming, so their like search of planet was like stopped and stuff. Like there's ways that this card's very good against Kesturia. It's just if they already have one on board, you're kind of just gonna get hit by a card effect, and usually it's gonna end up being like Unicorn that they summon first, so you're gonna probably lose a card out of your extra deck. The only draw card I play is Triple Prosperity. I didn't want to play the card that comes out in the structures because it activates and then you discard a whole card, and then if you get ashed on that, you basically just lost 2 cards for their 1. So it doesn't really make sense to play a card that goes 2 for 1 rather than 1 for 1. So it just makes sense that this is the only real like pot I would play too, because extra, if you banish all 3 of your Sarahs out of your extra deck, you kind of just lose the game. It's really hard to play without Sarah in this deck. So I'd rather not leave it up to chance, and I'd just rather play this. And then I usually only do 3 off of this, because I don't really want to do 6. I don't really need to draw into 6. I more just want to draw into another name or another trap or something. And then the only other spell we play is the 1 field spell. It's just to search off Pudica, and if you hard draw it, like you just don't really need to summon Pudica, but you basically just want this card in your opening hand if you can. Then to the traps, we're playing Triple Holotea, probably the most broken card in this deck, which is what makes this deck live, because it lets you be able to activate a trap on turn 1. And this deck never had that ability before. So you're guaranteed able to trigger both of Sarah's effect in the first turn, and it basically nets you so much advantage that your opponent can't really keep up if they don't have a way to stop your Sarah's effects. It also gives you recursion out of the graveyard, which a lot of people don't like see as like a really big deal, because they don't remember that effect a lot of the time, because it's usually like it's just a trap in grave. But basically you can banish this, summon one from grave, and it triggers all of their special summon effects. Also, a lot of the time, like they'll clear your Sarah, and you'll end up being able to just bring the Sarah back into the main monster zone with this, and just being able to like play again and trigger all your cards, and use Sarah basically to recur a bunch of your advantage. Then for the traps, we're playing for the holes. It's 2 Terrifying Nightmare, 2 Regular Nightmare, and 2 Floodgate Trapple. So the ratios are just a bunch of 2s, and then like 3 1-0s, just because you want to play as many of the good cards as you can in your first like couple cards, because you want to be able to like play these, and you usually discard one of these off of Holotea and then reset it from grave with Diana. So it's like you never really lose any advantage in this deck, and as long as you have like trigger cards, like all of these are triggered on summon. So it's like the reactive traps are pretty much what you want, which is why you don't play many other like trap cards in this deck. I think every trap in this deck is reactive. So you don't want to play anything that's not, because your Sarah won't trigger, and on top of that, you'll lose advantage just by not being able to actually respond with like an effect. So the biggest ones are these 3, because they're the 3 that you can use against pretty much every deck. And then the like more situational ones is like 1 bottomless, the 1 gravedigger, just send off Rafflesia so you don't get nibbed. I've thought about playing 2 of this, but you don't really ever need it, because you can also reset it from grave with Diana, so it's not necessary. But I always have thought about adding an extra one of these. And then the 1-time space chapel. You play the 1-time space for Brandon in case they go Mirror Jade. So this is your main out to Mirror Jade without letting it trigger or like just get blown up on the next turn, because it puts it back in the extra. It doesn't actually make their Mirror Jade activate. So it's probably the best card to play against that deck. And then the other traps we're playing in the main is obviously, in case we go second, triple evenly matched. It's just probably the best card going second, and it just lets you be able to play through your opponent's boards, because if you let them go first, every deck is pretty oppressive right now, and it's pretty toxic, so you kind of just need a way out of it. So triple evenly in the main. And the last card we're playing, I couldn't see myself playing without this card, so this makes the deck being 42 cards. But the reason I thought about it being okay is because a lot of people don't read the Traptrix monster in the extra dex effects, so they don't understand that they're actually unaffected by trap cards. And so I main deck triple torrential tribute. So basically, this card allows me to just like activate this, guaranteed that my cards are protected because they're unaffected by traps, so long as they have material or special out of the extra deck, like the link monsters. And my opponent doesn't really respect this card because they don't expect you to be playing it. And basically, so long as your cards have material or there's like Sarah specials from the extra deck, your cards are protected by their own effects. And then Rafflesia also protects them from card effect anyways. So it's pretty much like as long as your Rafflesia has one material, you activate this. They can't really be affected by cards, and then you just kind of blow out your opponent without them really knowing it. So the deck is a main deck 42, but I also didn't mind playing it at 42 just because the Parallel Exceed will always get you one out of the deck. And Rafflesia also kind of just guarantees you're sending the cards out of your deck, so you're not really playing 42 cards. You also search a lot in this deck that people like. That's why Droll decided against you, but I feel like you kind of need to be playing a bigger than 40 card deck just because you want to be able to play as many cards as possible in this deck. Even though consistency was like you're not going to see all of your cards as often as you'd like, I do feel like playing above 40 is fine just because it guarantees you being able to like resolve a bunch of your card effects, have a bunch of options, and also still be able to play really good cards that you kind of need to play against the meta because your deck is not, in theory, able to handle the meta decks without those cards. Just because like your deck obviously is a trap deck, so you're always going to be pretty much on the back foot in most games because you're always basically playing on turn 3 if you're going second. So you kind of just need to make sure that you have some cards to play against the meta. Um, for the extra deck, obviously it's one Zeus. I mean, I wanted to play 2 of this at the event, but I didn't really have a second one in time. So I ended up just throwing a random XYZ instead, and I kind of just decided on a Gaga Cowboy. In case the game goes into time, you have an option to try and burn them. It never came up. I never actually used this because I used Gravediggers from hand or deck off Rafflesia, so I never really needed to burn my opponent. And in most games, I usually had the advantage just based off traps and burning them off of like Gravedigger or just being able to swing into them and dealing enough damage where I never actually had to use this in time. Also, my games never really went to time. We played pretty decently. Like I just kind of explained my card effects to my opponents, and they kind of just thought about it themselves and realized like they kind of understood the effects and never really had to use this. But I did like the option just in case it ever came up, but it never did. And then for every other card in here, we're playing pretty much like 2 elves of everything just to guarantee that it's not banished off of Unicorn. Because if we lost these cards to Unicorn, it'd be pretty bad to try and come back without some of these cards. So 2 of this, it's basically just a monster reborn by detaching 2 from Grave. And it pretty much just lets you trigger like Myrmilio again, trigger Dionade, reset. And I used it a couple times to actually bring back Sarah and then link this away and the Sarah to make the link 3 and stuff. It just lets you extend to try and guarantee that you can push for game. Double Rafflesia, obviously. I never actually made the double Rafflesia like board, but you can actually make 2 of this because the card is not once per turn, it's once per copy of the card. So you can actually make 2 of this and have 2 interruptions instead of going for like the Pengu line. But I usually always went just for the Pengu line. So this is the Pengu. It lets you just search a card and it usually searches the protect the back row card, which lets me also trigger my Sarah on the next turn. So it's a guaranteed like protection card plus another set from your deck. There's no reason, like, in my opinion, to never search that card. Like I feel like it's really good. Then for the links, it's triple Sarah. Obviously, it's probably the best card in your extra deck. This card is the reason this deck is actually really good because you're able to just gain so much advantage off this card and then guarantee that your opponent can't really like stop you from pushing because you can push through at least 2 or 3 cards just off of this card alone just because it's able to gain you so much advantage. The only one I'm not playing 2 of is the Link 2. I feel like the Link 2 is the least important one you should be playing, but it is very good in theory in the grind game just because you're able to reset all your traps and then you're able to like recur one of the Traptrix from grave every time. So I would always summon this and then like knowing my opponent has like 1 or 2 back row. I use this a lot against the Labyrinth guy actually, because I would just keep summoning back my Myrmelio and keep popping his back row on the end phase, and it just guaranteed my cards being protected. And because I had Rafflesia, this card was always protected by battle, and then my Myrmelio was always protected by battle. So I would just link off the Myrmelio or like XYZ it off, make a Pengu, and then use this again on the end phase to reset the same Myrmelio. It was just a way to guarantee like the Labyrinth player never had cards to play against me. And then I'm playing 2 of the Link 3. It never came up where I summoned both of these, but in theory, you could summon one of these. It gives all your guys 1,000 attack, and then you're able to negate cards on board and then blow up one of them based on the number of insects and plants you have. And it's stackable, so you can summon both of these and make like 2,000 attack plus on each of your guys, but you never really need to do that because this makes your other, like the XYZs and Links, basically like 3,200, 3,500, and 2,800, so it makes them all pretty big. So I usually just summon one of these and then it basically dispelled the game for my opponent. And then the last card we're playing is Asa. I'm playing this just in case my opponent actually does make Ibli on me, like they give it to me, and I have no out to it. You can basically just normal summon one of your guys, summon this, and then just like get rid of the Ibli so you can actually play the game. And if you have some kind of extender of the field spell, like you don't really mind losing your first normal summon to make this, and then you just use the second normal summon to make the Sarah and play from there. But this is the only way we can get around that card because this deck doesn't really have a good main deck out to Ibli on your side of the board, so you pretty much have to play this, I think, in my opinion. It's also a get out to like any of the C cards that they give you, just because it is an Earth and it just requires an Earth. So I see no reason not to play this card in this deck because your whole deck is also Earth, so it guarantees like any normal summon basically is an out to all those cards that they would give you. And finally, side deck. It's kind of like up to player preference, but I feel like these are just in general pretty generically good cards. So 3 nib, obviously, I mean it's probably the best card against Cashier going second. Just being able to like out their whole board, and then you can also get rid of the token pretty easily in this deck. Triple Lightning Storm, just because it guarantees, again, going second, you're able to like out other trap decks, or against Cashier, you just kind of blow up their monsters and then you're able to play. You need to really get rid of that Macrocosmos because the Rise Heart makes this really unplayable. Like I've noticed that playing in the last tournament. I'm also playing double Dark Hole on the side just because, again, the Ibli card, like if you don't have an out to it, you pretty much can't play. And you definitely need a way around that. So I feel like double Dark Hole was fine. I'd probably replace this though, just because I am playing the Asa now. This was in theory because I didn't have the Asa at the time, but I picked it up right before Tourney. Again, you can kind of just replace these with whatever you feel. Like Dark Hole, I don't think is required, but it is very good. The one Duster, just again, this deck is pretty easy to make, and I feel like a lot of people might be playing it, so I wanted to play the Duster just in case I did see like a mirror match, or again, like Labyrinth also, this is very good against. Then for the traps, it's triple Imperm. This never came up. I never actually sided this card in, just because it's only good going first, but it's only good going first, and it's okay going second, but it doesn't actually net you enough. Like I don't think this card is enough to stop anyone's plays, because they still keep the monsters on board, and it lets them just extend. Like against Cashier, you're gonna negate their card, yeah, but then they still have the level 7 on board, so they're able to trigger like the Osis and stuff. So like I like the card, but I don't think it's enough right now. And then lastly, Triple Judgment. I sided this in pretty much every time I knew I was going first, and I just kind of sided out the evenly matches from the main whenever I knew I was going first. So it guaranteed me being able to just have another like line of protection. This card came up so often, like it blocked thrust cards, it blocked a normal summon Denko and the Tourney. Like this card was just like pretty much my MVP and helped me not just get blown up by my opponent's cards. So you definitely need to be playing this in some fashion, either main or side. Overall, it was a pretty good tourney. I ended up opening the boxes on stream. It was a pretty scuffed opening, but I did end up actually pulling pretty well. I opened a Starlight, a Rise Heart, and a Thrust, which I feel like this deck is an easy way to honestly guarantee you some wins. Because not many people are able to play around your cards, because they kind of have to pretty much play into them. Like traps are not like what people are prepared for right now. It's usually Kashtira, so your cards kind of slip under people's radar. And it's also like a lot of people are siding for Kashtira. So a lot of their side doesn't really hurt you. Like Book of Eclipse doesn't hurt this deck at all because your Sarah stays up anyways. So you're able to still play through them booking your cards. Like even if you're afraid to get the book, you're still able to play with your back row and Sarah. So I feel like a lot of the cards that would hurt meta do not hurt this deck at all, and I feel like this deck is a good option going into this meta, just because I feel like Castira is a decent matchup for this deck. Obviously, showing that like, I played 3 of them and I won those matches. Labyrinth is a bit more difficult, but I mean it's not impossible for you to win those games. It's pretty much you just have to play like really smart and carefully with your Mamelios, guaranteeing that they don't have cards to play against you. And against Branded, you do have a bad matchup against Branded. Just because Mirror Jade is able to like stop you from being able to do anything basically. Like it blows up all your guys on the Sarah summon if they do it correctly. They can trigger the Mirror Jade on the summon from deck with Sarah if you don't have like Parallel Exceed, and you pretty much cannot respond to the Mirror Jade if you don't have like Rafflesia or something like Gravedigger. So you pretty much need some way to stop the Mirror Jade, but if you have the Hole Trap that puts it back in extra, it will never trigger against you as long as you can play the Rafflesia correctly. And you pretty much just have to hope that you win the die roll against that deck. I have played a couple of times against Branded, but I've only won very few of them. Like I feel like that deck definitely is this deck's bad matchup. So that's the one we need to try to prepare for, and probably change out the Dark Holes for some more cards that like affect like Branded. You could probably play like Anti-Spell or something, just in the side, so you guarantee that they can't really use their spell cards on you. And then if they set them all, well, you can obviously pop them with Mermelio and just play from there. Yeah. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll be doing a couple more updates if I ever like change the deck out or if I do a couple more tourneys. I don't think the deck list will change much. I feel like this deck list was really good. Maybe just the Dark Holes, if anything. But thanks for watching.